Hey, what's up guys? Vortex Radar here. And in this video, we're going to be taking a closer look at the new Whistler Titan radar detector. The new Titan is a long-range radar detector, plus it introduces some brand new features which are a first for Whistler, including GPS lockouts, both manual and automatic GPS lockouts. You've got a 3-digit frequency display. You have customizable preset modes to make it really easy to change settings on the fly, which are actually really useful. Plus, we now have photo radar detection available for both the MRCD and the MRCT. And the new Titan is a big step up compared to Whistler's previous gen detectors like the CR97. The Titan is the first Whistler detector that I would personally be comfortable running myself or recommending to you guys. Now, you can go ahead and check out my full written review over on my website, which goes over all the same information that I'm going to cover here in this video, plus goes into even more technical information. I'll link to the written review down underneath the like button. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and take a closer look here at the new Titan. We're going to go over the new performance capabilities, the new features that it has, and basically get a better idea as far as what it is that makes the Titan Whistler's best radar detector ever. Now, Whistler's previous flagship, the CR97, had two big issues that prevented me from running it myself or recommending it to you guys. Now, the new Titan actually addresses both of these issues. Now, the first issue was that the previous gen detectors like the CR93 and CR97 would sometimes misreport K-band falses as Ka-band falses. Additionally, the other key issue was the range. The CR97 was an improvement over the CR93, but it still lagged behind the competition and other top-tier detectors in the same kind of price range. And so other detectors would give you better performance, better false alert filtering without the K to Ka confusion, plus they offered features like GPS lockouts, maybe a third thing. And so the Titan actually solves all of these. Let's actually go ahead and start by taking a look at the new performance capabilities. And starting off with long-range detection, about a year ago I did some beta testing with the Whistler Titan picking up 34/7 kind of in the forest around a bend. And I ran it alongside a bunch of other radar detectors. And if you take a look at the test results, you'll see that the CR97 was closer to the bottom of the pack, but the new Whistler Titan actually performed right on par with detectors like the Escort Max 3 or Uniden R3, which is great to see. I've also done some testing with it on my standard Red Barn test course. And starting with 33.8, you can see that the Titan, again, is going to perform right alongside detectors like the Escort Max 3 or the R3. The R3 did have one longer range detection, but otherwise, pretty much all the detectors detected right around the same location. Then moving on to 34.7, again, the detector did really well here too. Here's the results for the Max 3, here's the Uniden R3, and here is the Whistler Titan. So again, doing very well here on 34.7. And again, this is the first time I've been seeing a Whistler detector actually doing well here in testing, which is great to see. And finally, moving on to 35.5, in this situation, the Titan did trail a little bit behind the competition. You can see it only managed one of the longer distance alerts and it had two shorter range detections. The Max 3 had two longer range detections and one shorter range one, and then the Uniden R3 managed 3 long range detections on all 3 runs. Now, after this testing, I reported the results back to Whistler, and they've actually done some tweaking with the firmware to help make the detector potentially more likely at alerting to these kind of brief, longer distance alerts. And so I haven't had a chance to retest with the current public firmware, but we should expect results to be the same, if not a little bit better, against some of these detections when you're getting kind of these weak, brief alerts farther away. Either way, though, the main takeaway here is the fact that the new Whistler Titan can actually trade shots back and forth with other top-tier radar detectors. Things may vary, of course, between different radar guns, and of course they'll vary on different test courses and different situations and whatnot. And we definitely need to see a lot more testing now the detector is available for sale. But we finally now have a long-range radar detector available from Whistler. Next, let's take a closer look at blind spot filtering here with this detector. Overall, I find the blind spot filtering to be fairly comparable to other detectors, actually pretty good here in practice. On a 6-hour drive, I'll see maybe 4 to 5 BSM falses or so. And the typical culprits will be things like your Mazda CX-5 SUVs, as well as your Hondas, Acuras, Chryslers, and Buicks. I would love to see some of the K-notch options we have available from other detectors to kind of mute out weak signals around 24.124 for your Mazdas, or some of your Hondas and Acuras around 24.167 or 24.198, for example. That said, even without those filters, I do find that the false alerts are pretty well controlled here with the Titan. Next, let's move on and take a look at GPS lockouts. Again, this is a first here for Whistler. Now, the Titan offers both manual and automatic GPS lockouts. Now, over on my website and my written review, I'm going to go into a lot more technical information about this, but the gist of it is that yes, we finally have GPS lockouts available here on the Whistler, and they do operate a little bit differently than we see with other detectors. And starting off first with manual GPS lockouts, the idea is if you come across a stationary false alert, you can actually lock that signal out by double pressing the quiet button here on the top of the detector. The idea is that this is going to actually create a lockout zone around this location that actually locks out all K-band signals, not just a small frequency range around the locked out source. So you're basically creating a GPS lockout zone to where all K-band signals are going to be fully locked out. You're basically nuking K-band in a specific area. Now, auto lockouts, those are available too, and those do work differently. The idea here is when you pass a signal multiple times, and especially if you're doing it at faster speeds, the detector will see that and then eventually create a GPS lockout for you. Plus, the GPS lockout will only lock out a small section of K-band, not all of K-band entirely, unlike the manual lockouts. Now, also unlike other detectors, the auto lockouts typically will not kick in shopping center parking lots. They're only going to activate when other muting capabilities like your low speed muting are actually not in effect. If you have low speed muting, like you're in a parking lot or something, in that situation you don't need an auto lockout to quiet the signal, and so it'll never actually lock out that signal. Now with the Whistler detectors, you do have a smaller amount of both manual and auto lockouts available, and so to save memory, it seems like trying to avoid having a bunch of different lockouts. So one manual lockout is going to cover all of K-band, and one auto lockout, it's not actually going to kick in unless you're driving at faster speeds, and so things like low speed muting aren't already taking effect. Now, something to note is that auto lockouts are actually disabled by default. If you want to turn them on here on the Titan, you're going to want to go into the detector and choose an auto lockout radius for the XK radius menu option. And once you do this, you're basically setting how big the lockout zone is going to be created when the auto lockouts kick in. Now, something else to note is that the XK radius option is strictly for the auto lockouts. There is a second menu option called radius, and this alert radius option is going to apply to everything else, like your manual GPS lockouts, your manually marked GPS POIs, your red light camera and speed camera alerts, etc. For auto lockouts specifically, to enable those, you're going to want to turn on the XK radius option and choose whatever radius that you want. Now, auto unlearn is also available here too, just like auto learn, which is really nice in case, say, you're driving past a speed sign and then later it disappears. The detector will recognize that and then unlearn the lockout. So if later maybe an officer is in that same location and a similar frequency signal, the detector will actually alert you to that. So that is really cool. Now, one nice touch I like here with the Titan is that when you enter a GPS lockout zone, you'll actually see the satellite icon on the left side of the screen. It's going to change to a pin icon. And this is going to let you know that you're entering a manual GPS lockout zone and that all of your K-band signals are going to be muted. Now, in my testing, I've only been using the manual GPS lockouts just because I'm kind of impatient and I already know where all of my lockout locations are, and so I've just been locking out signals manually. Plus, I recently found out that auto lockouts behave differently, and so I haven't actually been using any of the auto lockouts, but either way, that is a really nice advantage over detectors like the Uniden R3, for example, that only has manual GPS lockouts. Next, the Titan also has a number of different ways of actually controlling the detectors based on speed, not just location like GPS lockouts, but also a number of different speed-based muting capabilities. Now, the first option, what if you want to go ahead and just mute all of your X and K-band alerts when you're traveling at low speed? Well, to do that, you just go into the detector and you set your low speed quiet X and K-band option. You just choose a speed threshold and the detector is going to go ahead and mute any of your X and K-band signals below this speed. Now, what if you want to go ahead and mute your detector at lower speeds regardless of band? To do that, you just pick a speed threshold for the auto quiet speed, and then you go to the auto quiet volume option and pick a volume level between 0 and 3. And then when you're traveling at lower speeds, all of your different alerts are going to be playing at that reduced auto quiet volume level. Now, what if your car has a lot of road noise and wind noise, especially when you're driving on the highway? Well, if that's the case, you can enable the speed volume menu option. This is going to progressively raise the detector's alert volume as you travel at faster speeds and then start to lower it again as you start to slow down. This is different than something like low speed muting that just mutes at low speeds or alerts normally above a certain speed threshold. Now, what if you want your detector to only mute weak alerts at low speed but still alert normally to strong alerts? Well, to do that, you're going to set your Titan to city mode, and then you're going to pick a speed threshold for the speed selectable city mode menu option. And now when you're traveling at lower speeds, when you get a weak radar signal, the detector is just going to give you 2 quick beeps and then go quiet. And then if you start getting closer to the signal and it starts getting stronger, the detector is going to give you 2 more warning beeps. On the other hand, if you're driving faster than that city speed threshold, the detector is effectively going to switch back into highway mode, which doesn't change sensitivity, it just changes kind of the alert behavior. And in this situation, instead of giving you the 2 weak beeps, it's just going to give you the normal full alert as usual. And so there's a ton of really cool kind of speed-based alert behavior changes that you can implement here with the detector. I honestly found it a little bit confusing at first, but once I took the time to kind of learn and understand it, it was actually pretty cool. Now, one feature that I do kind of find myself missing is the ability to adjust the detector's sensitivity based on speed. You do have the ability to vary the sensitivity a little bit manually, but there are no options to actually maybe reduce the sensitivity at lower speeds and raise it at higher speeds. It's more of just the alert behavior and kind of the volume of the beeps themselves, but otherwise the sensitivity is going to be the same regardless of speed. Next, let's take a quick look at the multi-radar photoradar detection. So the Titan has the ability to detect both the MRCD and the newer MRCT photoradar systems. Now, I don't have any of them here in my area, so I'm not able to test it personally, but turning it on and driving around with it, I do find that it does false occasionally, but then to be fair, other detectors are also going to sometimes false to MRCD as well. I found that some blind spot falses can trigger MRCD falses, and then I've also seen some shopping center door openers that can cause both MRCD and MRCT falses. Now, the algorithm that the Titan uses to scan for multi-radar is fairly simplistic, and I haven't seen any testing done by, say, those in Canada that have a lot of multi-radar in their area. So we're still looking forward to see test results to see how effective it is, how accurate it is, how much alert distance you get, etc. Once we have more test results to share, I'll put links to them down in the video description, and I'll update the written article over on my website too. And finally, one other quick thing to mention in the meantime, by default, the detector scans for K-band between 24.050 and 24.250. However, you do have the option in the detector to enable a special extended mode, and that's going to expand the multi-radar detection specifically all the way down to 23.9. And so this detector can scan down lower on K-band specifically for multi-radar, which can be helpful because they do sometimes actually transmit down lower on K-band like this. Next, let's quickly talk about the Ka-band segmentation options. So the Titan has 10 different Ka-band segments that you can choose from to have it alert to different frequency ranges within Ka-band. So if you want your traditional 258, for example, to scan for, alert for 33.8, 34.7, and 35.5, you can enable those options. Now, the Titan here does not actually vary how it scans across Ka-band. It's always going to be scanning all of Ka-band. So this band segmentation, it's purely going to be for alerting purposes, not for performance reasons. Now, I do find that overall, the Titan is actually pretty good as far as minimizing Ka-band falses. I have seen a couple here and there, and so if you encounter those, turning off those individual segments, especially if they are on non-police radar frequencies, you can actually do that here now with the Ka-band segmentation options. Now, there's no segmentation available for K-band, it's strictly for Ka. Next, let's take a closer look at the different user profiles available here in the detector. Basically, you can create 3 different user profiles on the detector. You select different settings for each profile, and then you can create different names for each profile, and then you can just quickly switch between them on the fly. So this can be helpful. Let's say you've got different people who all drive the same car, and they use the same detector, but they want different settings. They can actually create their own custom settings and then just switch between different settings depending on who's driving the car. This can also be useful, let's say you're driving between different states and officers use different radar guns in different states. Well, you can just quickly change different profiles, turning on different bands and whatnot, depending on what officers are using in different states. This could also be useful for radar detector testing if you want to maybe pre-select different filtering options to test with more aggressive filtering or less aggressive filtering to see the difference it makes. You can just quickly switch between different profiles on the fly and save time in testing. Now, I have seen other detectors do this capability, but usually you're going to need a phone to add it in. So something like a Valentine one with the phone or the NetRadar DSP, you can do different profiles. But here you can actually build everything in directly into the detector itself. The Titan does not have Bluetooth, by the way. There's no Bluetooth or phone integration, so everything is going to be done directly in the detector itself. Next, let's take a closer look at the cigarette lighter power cord. This is the new Intellicord 2.0. Now, we've got the same barrel connector into the radar detector, just like with previous Whistler detectors, but we've got higher power output capabilities for the USB port. It can now output 2.1 amps for your phone, plus it can output more power for a more power-hungry radar detector. The biggest difference, though, is new capabilities here for the button on the side of the power cable. And you can program the detector to do different things, either based on a short press of the button for S1 or a long press for S2. For example, you've got the quiet option that lets you mute signals or lock out signals. You've got the waypoint option, which lets you create GPS user mark alerts. You've got the user option that's going to let you switch between those 3 different user profiles. You've got the city option, which allows you to switch between highway mode and the different city modes. You've got the dim option, which is going to allow you to adjust the display brightness. And finally, you've got the power button, which is going to allow you to remotely turn the detector on or off. Now, personally, I like setting the short press here, S1, to the quiet mode option. This way, when I press the side button here, it's going to mute the detector, or I can double press it to lock out different false alerts. Now, a quick pro tip. If you're using S2, the long press, to switch between the different user profiles, make sure you go into all 3 individual user profiles and set S2 to user. This way, when you do the long button press, each profile is set up to then switch over to the next profile afterwards. So just a quick tip for that. Next, let's see how detectable the Titan is by radar detector detectors, including both the Spectre 3 and the Spectre Elite. Now, Whistler does not advertise the Titan as a stealth detector, and in my testing, it basically maxed out my test course. Now, starting off testing with the Spectre 3, I noticed that as soon as I crested the initial hill, the Spectre would typically start alerting around 1,000 feet to 1,200 feet away or so. And the Spectre would continue alerting off and on as I got closer to the Titan. It wasn't a solid continuous lock, it was kind of sporadic, which does make it tougher for the officer to identify which car has the Titan, but nevertheless I could definitely pick it up pretty far away. Next, moving on to the newer Spectre Elite, surprisingly it actually did a better job of detecting the Titan. Again, I would typically start detecting it around 1,100 to 1,200 feet away or so, and while initially the lock was more sporadic, as I got closer it definitely locked on a lot better, to the point where it was basically screaming as I got closer to the Titan. This made it a lot easier to tell which car had the radar detector, especially when the Spectre would suddenly go quiet after I passed the car with the Titan. Testing from the rear, things were a little bit better. With the Spectre 3, I would typically only get a little blip while passing the car, maybe 50 feet away or so. With the Spectre Elite, I was getting more of an alert, and it started going off around 200 to 300 feet away or so. If an officer was then to just pull up behind you, say at a red light for example, it would be really clear that there was a radar detector in front of him. And keep in mind, the Titan does not have a rear-facing antenna to give it arrows, it only has one front-facing antenna, which would actually be pointing away from the Spectre in this case. Now, I wasn't totally confident in my results after this day of testing, and so I went out again the next day to retest and double check my findings, and I wound up getting the same results again on the second day of testing. Now, here in the United States, it's not critical for us to have a stealth detector, but for those of you who really do need that feature, I would recommend that you pick up a different detector instead. Next, moving on to laser detection, Whistlers have traditionally had some pretty cool features here, and the same is true here for the Titan. Now, first off, when you get shot with laser, the detector can actually display the pulse rate of the laser source, whether it's a false alert or the police laser gun. Now, it doesn't then translate that pulse rate into a specific laser gun ID, but it does give you the pulse rate, which is a pretty cool feature. Additionally, if you have an area that regularly falses your detector to laser, you can just press the quiet button on the detector, and you can lock out any signals that have that same pulse rate. And the next time the detector picks up that same signal, it's just going to give you 2 quick beeps instead of the full alert, and then it's going to go quiet. Now, driving around, I have encountered occasional laser falses from sources that I can't identify. I'm wondering maybe it's from some nearby cars, but I'm not totally sure what it is that's been causing them. And then finally, there's also laser segmentation available where there's 3 different ranges of laser pulse rates, and you can turn on and off alerts to laser signals within those different frequency ranges, or I guess pulse rate ranges. This isn't typically something that we would need here in North America, but it can be useful if you're driving overseas, for example, and officers only use maybe just a few different laser guns, and you can just turn on alerts to those pulse patterns and turn off everything else to hopefully eliminate some of the false alerts that you may otherwise experience. Next, let's quickly talk about the firmware update process to update the detector. So here on the side of the detector, we've got a micro USB port, so you can plug the detector into your computer and update it that way. And to download the update software and the latest updates, you're going to head on over to Whistler's downloads page. You'll want to head on over to the page for the Titan. There's no updates available yet, so we'll just take a look at the CR97's page real quick to see how it works. And you'll see there's options available to download both the update software, any available firmware updates, or a GPS database for the red light camera and speed camera alerts. Now, the update software for the Titan is going to be almost the same as what we had for the CR97. You're going to see options here to update the firmware, the GPS database, or the new option here is also to update the DSP within the detector too. And then basically after you download the different update files to your computer, you just tell the update software to load in those specific files and it can copy them on over to your detector. Now, the update software does not have the ability to go out and automatically check for any new updates and download it directly. You're actually going to have to do the downloading yourself manually and tell the update software to go and grab those specific files and copy them on over to the detector. Additionally, this update software, it's only available for Windows. There's no Mac available, or Mac software available, unfortunately. So if you're a Mac user, you are going to need to have a Windows computer or dual boot or do something like that if you want to update your Titan. And then finally, as far as a couple other just kind of cool random features that didn't necessarily warrant their own section, there's things like when you're in the menu, you can scroll both forwards and backwards, which is really nice in case maybe you scroll past a menu option, you can quickly just go back to it instead of having to go through the entire menu again. Plus, that settings menu actually stays open a long time. It doesn't time out and kick you out as fast as it does on other detectors. Plus, if it does kick you out, next time you reopen the menu, it drops you back into the same place you left off. It doesn't go all the way back to the beginning like it does with other detectors. Additionally, when you manually mute an alert, say a BSM false, you'll actually see a muted icon down on the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And this will actually stay there even after the signal goes away. Now, if the signal comes back, the detector will remute that signal. If the signal then stays away long enough for that muted icon to go away, that's when you know that the signal will alert again next time you come by. So having kind of a visual indication of how long that mute latch lasts, that's a pretty cool feature too. Next, if you enable the RSID V option, the detector can actually announce the frequency of the radar signal. It's not going to tell you the whole thing, it'll just kind of round it to give you a general idea. Additionally, if you get hit with a really strong instant-on radar shot, the detector will display pulse on screen before switching over to the standard traditional display. Multi-radar alerts, those can be locked out, like K-band alerts. The GPS feature, there's actually a GPS stealth option, which is really nice if you're parked and your power supply, your cigarette lighter, is always on even when you're parked. In this situation, it'll actually turn off the detector's display after you've been parked for longer than a minute. And this will help ensure the detector is not going to be as visible when you're in a parking lot. You will see a little dot on screen to let you know that it's still on, but otherwise the display is going to be off. Additionally, you can also set the battery saver option to fully power off the detector after 1, 2, or 3 hours. Additionally, you also do have the ability to individually control the detector sensitivity to X, K, and Ka band. You just go into the menu option where you turn the different bands on and off, and you hit the side volume up or volume down buttons to adjust the sensitivity between high, medium, and low. Now, this doesn't make a dramatic difference. It's only going to change your sensitivity 1 or 2 dB each, but you do still have the option here nonetheless. Now, as far as options that I would like to see added here to the detector that aren't available, I would love to see things like the sensitivity being able to be adjusted based on speed, not just manually setting it and leaving it fixed. I would also like to see things like high-speed muting to mute red light camera alerts when I'm driving on the highway. There are situations I find where there's red light cameras on nearby surface streets that I'll get alerted to when I'm driving by them. And while the detector does have the ability to maybe reduce the radius of how far it alerts to, some of those are like right on an underpass, right under the highway, so I still get alerted regardless. And so I'd love to see the option to maybe mute red light cameras when I'm traveling at highway speeds like I do with some other detectors. I'd also like to see some improvements to GPS lockouts, things like more memory to store more lockouts, both manual and automatic, which may help us work around some of the things like having one manual lockout nuke all of K-band, or auto lockouts not kicking in unless you're traveling at low speeds and stuff, which, to be fair, I mean, yes, you can get by with that kind of stuff, but I would love to see more sophisticated lockouts, especially if we had some more memory available built into the detector. Blind spot filtering is pretty good here with the detector, but I've kind of gotten used to things like your K notches to mute out weak signals within certain frequency ranges where you'll commonly see blind spot falses. That's not available here with the Titan, but it's something that they could add with a software update. A multicolor OLED display, that could be nice. The blue OLED looks great and it works fine, but I do find sometimes with multicolor OLEDs you can have different colors to indicate different things, and that can be useful. I'd like to see the ability to skip displaying the different settings on startup. Now, you can choose to have the detector boot up silently and not beep during startup, but you can't have an instant startup if you want the detector to immediately be up and running as soon as you start driving. It's not a long delay, but I'd love to at least have the option to just disable displaying the different alerts regardless. It can be useful to double check settings or maybe display which profile you've got loaded in, but again, it just comes down to having the option to choose to configure it the way that you want. I'd like to see optional Ka-band lockouts in case you come across, say, a satellite dish that falses your detector. Ka falses are pretty rare with the detector, but it is nice to sometimes have the ability to do Ka lockouts if needed. And then I'd also like to see some improvements to the update software, things like having the update software automatically check for newer updates and automatically download them for you and load them into the detector, all in one step without you having to go to the website and download the files and copy them to your computer. Plus, I'd also like to see Mac update software as well, not just Windows update software. Now, how does the Titan compare to the competition? Well, of course, there's the Uniden R3. That detector is $50 less, and it's a very popular radar detector. It's one of my go-to recommendations in this price range. Now, the Titan, it's $50 more, and for the money, you're going to be getting automatic GPS lockouts instead of just manual lockouts, plus you're going to be getting a 3-year warranty instead of just a 1-year warranty. Not to mention you're going to be getting those custom user profiles as well. But in my mind, the biggest reason to choose the Titan over the R3 would be for the automatic GPS lockouts. Next, there's the Redenso XP. This detector is the same price as the Titan at $349, but the Titan's going to give you even longer range, automatic GPS lockouts, as well as the photo radar detection. Now, the Redenso does offer a ticket-free guarantee, but personally, I would rather invest the money in a better performing detector that would hopefully help me avoid the ticket in the first place. Plus, it offers some really nice additional features as well. So for my money, I would definitely be picking the Titan. And then finally, there's the Escort Max 3, which is $50 more than the Titan at $399. And the main reason to choose the Max 3 would be for the Bluetooth capabilities. When you add Bluetooth, it makes it easier to change the different settings with your phone. Plus, the Max 3 can share different alerts in real time with other drivers. It's a lot like Waze, except it's more automatic and displays things right on the face of the detector. Plus, it can display the speed limit of the current road that you're on right on the face of the detector. If you're running Waze or Google Maps, you're going to be getting this kind of stuff on your phone as well. But you do have the Bluetooth capabilities built into the Max 3 to make it easier to change settings and do all the stuff right in the detector. Now with the Escort, you can also get a ticket-free guarantee, like with the Redenso, but I think the Bluetooth would really be the biggest advantage and the reason to spend the extra $50 over the Titan. Either way though, I think the Titan, it's a solid radar detector. It's got its pros and cons just like anything else, but this is the first time that I would personally feel comfortable running a Whistler myself or including it on like a best radar detector type list. I think it slots in perfectly at $349, $50 more than the R3 to get the auto lockouts, and then $50 more to get the Max 3 to get the Bluetooth capabilities. And I think at $349, it makes a lot of sense, priced where it is, and it's a nice and solid radar detector. It's the first time that I think Whistler has a radar detector that deserves to be alongside all these other top-tier radar detectors when we're looking at the very best radar detectors available in the market at different price points. And so if you're looking for a good performance radar detector, photo radar detection, these different user profiles, and having both manual and automatic GPS lockouts, I think the Whistler Titan is a nice solid choice. It's available directly on Whistler's website. I'll put a link to it down in the video description, and if you'd like to pick one up, you can click the link down there and order a Titan yourself. And so, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are all doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.